Welcome to our lesson on working with elevations, interior elevations, and sections. In the later versions of ARCHICAD, we now have in our document section of the toolbox tools for drawing sections, exterior elevations, and an interior elevation tool. If we select our elevation tool, in our info box we have a number of parameters that we can use to define and control the default settings of the elevation tool. The elevation marker is designed primarily for exterior elevations. The section tool is designed for cuts through the model, and the interior elevation tool is intended to speed the process of creating interior elevations. So let's take a look and see how each one of these work. If we go into our default settings for the interior elevation tool, you'll notice we have a series of drop-down boxes similar to other tools in ARCHICAD. The first one is the general settings, and here we have an opportunity to give that section a reference ID and an elevation. So let's call this first reference ID EXEL for exterior elevation 001, and we'll name that simply the front elevation. We have a choice here to create a new elevation viewpoint, place a linked marker, or place an unlinked marker. We're going to leave that at create new elevation viewpoint. And we have a choice here to leave this as the first place drawing of the viewpoint or the viewpoint, and we're going to leave that as the first place drawing of the viewpoint. We can have the model automatically rebuilt, or we can manually rebuild the model, or we can create a drawing, and we'll get into the various different reasons to alter this drop down box from one to the other a little later on. We have a choice here for horizontal range, which would be either infinite or limited, and we also have a choice for our vertical range, which would be infinite or limited. In most cases we're going to leave both of these on infinite. Here we have a choice to put our marker head in the middle or our marker head at the ends. And if we choose marker head at the ends, we can put a marker on just one side or the other, and that's controlled with these little check boxes here. Here we can choose the style of the elevation marker. We can have no marker, a built-in elevation marker. Now let's take a look at how each one of these looks. No marker, built-in elevation marker, elevation marker 12, elevation marker NCS 12, You'll notice here we have two ID lines. We have our drawing ID and our layout ID, or we can load another elevation marker or a custom elevation marker of our own design or choosing. Here we can choose the font type, and we can choose the text height and the marker height and the marker pen. I find the defaults are quite acceptable. Down in this box we have some additional parameters we can work with. We can work with the marker text pen, the marker text rotation. We can choose horizontal, vertical, or to align with the elevation line. We can show side fills on or off. If you take a look here, you'll see what happens when we turn that off. Then we have selections for the first and second text row. We can show the reference ID. We have a choice of on or off. We can show the section name on and off, and we can show the drawing ID on or off. And then we have the same options for the second text row. And we also have some options for the background fill, the fill pen, and the fill background pen. Here we have some additional parameters that we can work with for the marker head. And here we have some options for the model display. We can select uniform pen for cut elements. We can fill uncut surfaces with nothing or a uniform pen color. Here we can bring some color into our elevations by using our own material colors non-shaded. And the same thing here, we can use our own material colors but have them shaded. We can choose uniform pen for uncut contours. We can select the color of the uncut contours pens. We can choose to turn vectorial 3D hatching on or off. And we can choose to turn transparency on or off. With our sun shadows, we can choose either custom or as in the 3D window. We can select the degrees for the sun azimuth and the sun altitude, and we can also choose to show vectorial sun shadows. If we choose this box, you'll see we have some further parameters that come available to us. We can select the fill type for the foreground fill. We can select the fill pen, the fill background pen. If we choose mark distance area, We can choose to fill the uncut surfaces with nothing. We can check this option for uniform pen for uncut contours, and to show or not show the 3D hatching or the vectorial sun shadows. And we'll get into how all this works and how this looks after we establish a couple of elevations. We'll run through each one of these, turning them on and off, and taking a look at how that affects the look and the aesthetics of the elevation. And with all these different ways of working with the elevations, we have many different design aesthetics that we could create. If we go into story levels, we can select from none, display only, or display and output. We can show how our story level lines look, and we can select the line and the line color. We can show markers on the left side, markers on the right side, or we can turn them on and off. We can turn the lines on and off. Now this is how we determine the offset from the drawing. Here we have our marker options, our font, the size, some additional parameters that we can work with. And here we have our grid tool, which is explained in a separate video. And here we can select the layer that we want our section line placed on. A marker elevation is correct for this exterior elevation. So we'll select OK, and we'll draw our first elevation. Start with one click, end with another click. Now the eyeball is going to show us the direction of the view of the elevation, but something else that's important is where we place the eyeball when we click, because that's going to determine that marked distance area and how that works. So we're going to put this right about here, right behind the building. And as you can see, the drawing ID and layout ID are blank right now because we have not placed the drawing on our layout. If we select that elevation, we can scroll through here and at any time change these parameters in the info box. With that elevation selected, if we right click on our mouse, we'll bring up a context menu and we can select Open Elevation, and ARCHICAD will generate the elevation automatically for us. One thing you'll notice that when we create an elevation, if we go into our navigator and we go to elevations, you'll see that upon creating that exterior elevation 001, front elevation, it's already put that into the navigator under elevations. So let's go back to the first floor plan, and we'll continue on with elevations. We've got our front elevation, and select our elevation tool again, and we'll come back here and we'll put in our rear elevation, and our right side elevation, and our left side elevation. If you do what I just did and you select that elevation, and we want to change the marked distance area, we can click this point here. We'll bring up a pet palette. We'll select Move Section Elevation Line Segment, and we can move that to anywhere throughout the project. Now if you look in the navigator, you'll see that under elevations we have our front elevation, and automatically numbered we have the next elevation 002, 003, 004, but the names are not correct, so what we can do is just rename the elevation. The second one is rear. Third one is right. Right side elevation. And the next one is left side elevation. So now if we go into our layout book, and we can rename these pages here, we'll rename that layout page front elevation. We'll rename that layout rear elevation. We'll rename that layout right side elevation. And we'll rename that layout left side elevation. If we open up the front elevation, we go to our view map, and come down here under elevations, and we select our front elevation and drag this over. We can select this, and our pet palette box comes up. We want to drag that, and we can drop that anywhere we like. Now let's do that for the front. The rear. Notice the cursor is in the start point for the placement of the drawing. So we can just bring it right over to here, drop it down, and it should be in about the right place once it's generated. There we go. Another thing we can do is we can select that drawing, and we can click on this node here. That brings up a pet palette, and here we can adjust the polygon outline. We'll click that box right there, and you'll see how that works. We can slide this over to here, and then we can drag the entire drawing back into the middle. Go back over to our right side elevation and drag this drawing into place. If we don't want to adjust the polygon outlines to make this fit the page, we can select the drawing, and we can right click to bring up our context menu and select Drawing Selection Settings. And here we can go down to our drawing scale, and we can say make that 3/16 scale. Click OK. That'll automatically adjust the size of the drawing so we can see everything if we'd like. We can move that right back into place. I think we can safely put both our right and left side elevations on this page. So I'm going to go back to our view map, and we'll select our left side elevation, drop that into place. Let's select it and change the scale again. Select OK. And we'll move this up into the middle. Now we'll go back to our project map, and we'll double click on the first floor. Now you'll see that on the marker head, because we've placed the drawings, we now know that this drawing, which is number 1, has been dropped onto page A201. And if we go to page A201 to confirm this. Double click A201 and front elevation drawing 1. Now if we were to move this to another page, it would automatically adjust the marker head. And reference the page that we've dropped it onto. Let me illustrate that. We'll go into A203 where I have our right side elevation and our left side elevation. You'll notice here that we are automatically updating the drawings. We have an option to turn off the automatic update, and we'll get into that a little bit later. If we have do have a extremely large project, we may want to manually update so we don't have to wait every time we switch between pages for the drawings to update. Now our left side elevation is to page A203. We can confirm that by going back to our first floor plan. And if we look at that left elevation, we'll see that was drawing 2 on page A203. Let's see what happens if we move that drawing and how that marker is changed. Go back into page A203. We'll delete this drawing here. And this time we'll put it on its own page, page A204, left side elevations. We'll select that and change the scale again. Now if we go back to our project map and we zoom in on that marker, you'll see now it's automatically changed the number, reflecting the change in the page. So that's how automatic numbering works in ARCHICAD, and it's a great way to keep track of our drawings. Now let's take a look at our front elevation here. Right now our front elevation is going from this point here to this point here, but that doesn't accurately reflect the entire lot. So what we can do is we can click this point here, and we have stretch selected in our pet palette, and we can bring that out here. And we do the same thing on this side, and this way we'll show the entire lot. If we right click and we go to elevation selection settings, here is where we can select to auto rebuild the model or have manual rebuilding of the model. We're going to leave that on auto rebuild for now, as it's not taking too long to regenerate these elevations. Okay, now we're going to go in a model display, and we'll slide this back down so we can see everything. And let's take a look at how these different features affect the look of the elevation when it's generated. First of all, let's click Uniform Pen for cut elements. Okay, now we've got some additional parameters available to us. And for purposes of demonstration, we're just going to leave these pretty much the same for now. But just by checking that box and clicking OK, we'll open that elevation again. Here's the original. Now we'll regenerate. And because we haven't cut through much, but right here you can see now that this has become a uniform pen. With the elevation selected, if we go down to, if we right click, bring up our context menu, and we go to elevation settings, that'll bring up that box again. And here we can really have some fun. Fill uncut surfaces with nothing. Now let's see what it looks like if we scroll through these various different options. Let's say uniform pen color. And we'll pick a kind of gray color. Click OK. Regenerate. That gives us a different look. We'll bring up elevation settings again. And we'll put this back to white background. Now we'll go into Own Material Colors Non-Shaded. Click OK. Now we're picking up the material colors that we assign to the various different materials in the project. Now we'll select All Material Colors Shaded and click OK. Again, another look. If we turn off vectorial 3D hatching and uniform pen for uncut, select OK. We've lost the vectorial hatching on the roof line and the brick, and now we just have the material colors. If we change the sun azimuth and altitude, you can see how that affects the shading, so we have control over the shading. I'm going to put this back at 45, and we'll put this back at 45. We'll turn off the vectorial sun shadows and select OK. You can see now that our shadows have completely disappeared. Alright, now let's take a look at this marked distance area. These trees in the background here are behind our distance marker that we placed when we originally placed the elevation. So what we can do is we can assign that a uniform color, and we can say make that a light gray, and you can see the color of our contours pinned now is a light green. You can also make that a light gray, and we'll select OK. And now when we rebuild the model, you can see how the background has faded out, making that foreground area seem a little more three-dimensional. Okay, I've brought this back to our original settings, and we're going to go back to the first floor plan. We'll go down here and we'll fit that into the window. And now we're going to select our section tool, because we're going to cut some sections through the building. And again, up here, if you go into this box here, the settings dialog box, we can adjust all our settings, which were very similar to the elevation settings. We can select continuous or a segmented marker line. We can select marker head in the middle or marker head at the ends. If we have segmented selected, we'll select continuous. Click OK. Here we'll put a section through the middle of the building. And we'll click here. And you can see this gives us the range that that particular section is going to look through, as in the elevation. If we go into section selection settings, we can select limited. That's what we have right now. We can select 0 depth, or we can select infinite. If we select infinite and select OK, you'll see that line disappear. Now we are viewing everything in this section from here to infinity. So if we open up that section and take a look, you'll see how that section through the building looks. Now if we go into our section settings and we show our limited depth as selected on the floor plan and select OK. Now we've got a limited depth view, and if we go back into our section settings and we select 0 depth and select OK, now we've got a 0 depth. The only thing we're showing is exactly where we're cutting through and nothing behind it. So go back to section settings and we'll make that infinite and select OK. If we go into our selection settings again, and we go into our model display, and we have pretty much the same options for our section as we did on our elevations. We can choose uniform pen for uncut elements. We'll select OK, and we'll see what that does to our drawing. We'll go back into our section settings and we'll fill the uncut surfaces with a uniform pen color. Right now that's white, and we'll make it a little bit grayer. Let's go back to white on that. Here we'll turn off our vectorial 3D hatching. And this should disappear. If we go back in here and we work with all material colors, select OK. Now we're showing the project with its own material colors. If we select vectorial sun shadows, and we mark the distance area, we change the green to gray. And select OK. So as you can see, playing with those different parameters gives us a very comprehensive and extensive way to adjust all the looks of the elevations and the sections. Let's turn off vectorial sun shadows. If we go here and we change our cut fill background pen from white to, say, black, you can see that we'll get very black, bold lines for any of the cut elements. Change that back. Go back to our floor plan. Deselect that. Select our section marker again. Place a couple of more sections. We'll place one here through the front porch. Again, we'll make that infinite. Select OK. Open that section. This goes back to our original default settings. If we want, we can go back to the first floor plan, and we can click on Alt, bring up the eyedropper, pick up those parameters, and then Control Alt and inject those parameters into the section that we changed. And now if we open that section, as you can see, we're back to our original default parameters. Okay, let's go back into section settings, auto rebuild model, and we're in section 1, and we're going to change this to a drawing. I click OK. Now when we do that in the section view, what happens? You'll notice that when we go to move an element, instead of just moving the element, by clicking on drawing, we've broken this down into lines and fills. There's our fill for the slab. Here's a line for the slab. Here's a line for the wall and a fill for the wall. So now we've got our drawing broken down into our most basic form, which is lines and fills. Now if I go back to our plan and our sections, and we've updated that, you can see where we moved our basic elements. Let's change the scale on this to 3/16. Select OK. Now with the drawing selected, now if we open our source view and we click Rebuild from Model, you'll notice everything goes back into its original position. Still broken down into its basic elements. And then if we go back into section settings here, and select Auto Rebuild Model and click OK. Now we go back and we select an element, say the footer, And now we're back to working in our original format. And click undo and put that footer back. Alright, another thing with that we can do when we're drawing a wall section is, if we come up here, you'll notice that we have different geometry methods for creating the section line. We can create a single line or a staggered line, and with the staggered line selected, what we can do is we can draw a section say we want to pick up everything on the inside of the house. We can start here, come up here, over to here, back to here, through here, and when we get to the end we click again, we get our eyeball. Now let's take a look at this staggered section. We'll select it and right click and left click on open section. And that's our look on the staggered section. Alright, the third and final thing we want to take a look at is the interior elevation tool. If we double click the interior elevation tool, that'll bring up our interior elevation default settings. And as in sections and elevations, we have various different parameters. We have the vertical range selected as limited, and we're going from 0 to 9 feet. But I believe the height of the ceiling in this project is 8'8", so we're going to change that to 8-8, 8 foot 8 inches. We'll select OK. And with the interior elevation tool selected, the vertical range set to 8'8", the ID number set to IE-01. What we'll do is we'll define a range for that interior elevation, and we do that by using one of several methods here, either the single geometry method, the polygonal method, the rectangular, or the rectangular rotated method. Right now I want to pick up the elevations of this exterior lanai, and I want to include this little jog in the interior wall, this bay-like window. So I'll take the rectangular method and we'll place our cursor in the corner and click, and we'll drag a rectangle out to cover the extents of this particular room, and then we'll click again. And then notice as we draw our cursor back in, we have a little box that's expanding and contracting, and this will give us the start point for the 4 elevations that are going to be automatically created in this room. So we're going to put this about here, and give us a click. Now this particular elevation is cutting through this sink cabinet here. So what I'll do is I'll move this back a little. Now we've got elevations that are consecutively numbered. We've got elevation 1, 2, 3, and 4. And you'll notice if we go into the project map, we now have some interior elevation set up. We click the little plus blocks to expand that. I'll bring this over a little, and you can see we have our 1, 2, 3, 4 room elevations. Now if we go into our layout book, you can see I've created a page for our interior elevations, and I'll bring that up and fit it to the window. Then we'll go into our view map and expand our interior elevations. Click on our room elevations and we'll drag and drop that onto the page. And as you can see, ARCHICAD is automatically set up 1, 2, 3, 4 room elevations. We can select these elevations and right click to bring up our context menu, go into drawing selection settings. If we'd liked, we can enlarge those elevations, say make them 1/2 inch to 1 foot. Click, bring up our pet palette, drag, and now we can individually place these wherever we'd like on the floor plan. Once placed, we can open the elevation. By right-clicking, bringing our context menu up, clicking on Open Source View. And now we can make edits as necessary. That will automatically be updated on the floor plan and the model. If we go back to our floor plan, okay, now with our interior elevation tool selected, we can select Control A. And select our interior elevations, and we can go into interior elevation selection settings. And if we go up here to a reference ID and we click on this box here, you'll notice we have a choice of zone name, zone number, zone category, elevation orientation, short orientation, and elevation number. And these are like auto text. If we say have that area designated as a zone and we click zone name, then automatically that zone name will show on the reference ID. We'll take that out for now. And down here in the name we have the same thing. We have a drop down box where we can select zone name, zone number, zone category, elevation orientation, short orientation, or elevation number. Alright, also in our general settings dialog box we have in our vertical range selection box infinite, limited, and detect and fit to zones. So if we select this box and we have created a zone for that particular area and assigned it the correct height, our elevation will automatically detect and fit to those zones. On Show On Stories we have the option of home, entirely in range, or partly in range. Most often we're only going to show our markers on the home story. Entirely in range would put that marker throughout the project. Or partly in range, say we have a two-story atrium in a multi-story building, we may want to select partly in range. With our marker style, as usual, we have our font size and type. We can select from various different markers, and you can see those updated here in the preview box. We can select how our first text row is notated, either referred, drawing, or custom. We can show the reference ID on or off, and we can show the name on or off. We can add in a custom text. Second text row is basically the same thing. We can select referred drawing. we have some options here in our model display. We can hide the cut elements. We can select uniform pen color. If we select that, we have further options that we can work with. As in the other sections and elevations, we can fill the uncut surfaces with nothing, a uniform pen color, own material colors, non-shaded, and own material colors shaded. Let's select own material colors shaded. Now we can turn on the vectorial 3D hatching if we want. Transparency, if that's selected, that will allow us to see through glass windows and doors. Exclude view blocking walls. If we have a wall somewhere on the plan that's blocking a view of the section that we want to see behind it, we can check this box to exclude those walls. We can also turn on vectorial sun shadow. So let's select OK. And now our section markers are updated. We can go back into our interior elevations. On the layout book, those will be automatically updated. And you can see the effects of the various different selections that we made in our options box. Now you'll notice in this section 3 here that we've cut through the cabinet. So there's one other thing we can do. We can hide cut elements. Let's illustrate that. We'll go back to our floor plan and we'll select interior elevations, Control A to select them all. We'll open interior elevation selection settings. And we'll select hide cut elements and we'll check that box. Select OK. Now if we go back into our interior elevations page and let those update, you'll notice that that cut element has disappeared. So that's another way affecting the look of the elevation when it's generated from the floor plan. Another thing that we can do with our interior elevations is with the interior elevation selected, we can go into the interior elevation selection settings. We can go to marker placement and click on one common marker for the interior elevation group. We'll select OK. And now those 4 separate markers have been combined into one. We can also go into our marker settings and select the viewpoint ID off or on, and the viewpoint name on or off. With the viewpoint name on and the viewpoint ID off, we get north, west, east, and south. Click OK. And we can refer to our drawings instead of 1, 2, 3, 4, north, east, west, and south. You can see the changes reflected here under interior elevations. We've got 1, 2, 3, 4, and northeast, south, and west. And this time northeast, south, and west is showing.